You're on Ben's World with Ben Vidgen, and just Google Ben Vidgen. In fact, just Google Postman Productions and Ben's World. You should be okay. Very short video today. I just when it came to the issue, the World Health Organization has said that the major way to combat the coronavirus as the head stated, was to test, test, and test. Um, I wrote an article very originally in the piece, basically pointing that actually that wasn't happening in New Zealand, comparing us to the German and Austrian figures where they've done that and achieved very good results. They had quite interesting feedback from that one because my LinkedIn profile was basically looked at by a number of people from pharmaceutical industries after I posted that, and that included what was listed. It was listed as private, but the classification was said CEO, fund manager portfolio. So basically, that's the CEO of Philips, or not internationally, then at least locally. So still very, very high up the food chain. We're very interested to see what I'm saying as the LinkedIn profile feedback shows. Interesting too, because at the end of the day, I'm more of a print-based media, so my online stuff is really still, volume of traffic is quite small in comparison. Um, to that. So, it's not like I'm out there and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people reading it. So for that to be backed up and then fed up the food chain, again, is quite an industry that I've obviously hit a nerve. We've actually also seen the Prime Minister come back saying that yes, we will be doing more testing, and they're ramping it up, and other media people out there have also realised the importance of testing and focusing on that point. So to all my colleagues out there, good on you, because again, I'm quoting from the head of the World Health Organization that the best way to counter this is to test, test, test. Um, on that basis, I went looking. I discovered that the New Zealand Herald, in relating to the cost testing, well, one of the children at one of the schools in Auckland where the clusters emerged, went to get tested and was basically rejected. And when the parent pushed the issue, came back and said, well, no, that's because they cost $3,000 a test cost. That's the New Zealand Herald that's where I got my $3,000 figure from. That a lot of people have gone, no, wait, what? No, that can't be the deal. Of course, the $3,000. It's not necessarily what you or I pay, but it's what Pharmac pays. So they go to a medical company, they buy the stuff, they set up a contract, and then they have a unit of costing. Where this gets very, very, very interesting is when you turn around and you look at the costings. When you go online and start looking at where it's listed as costs overseas from other different news reports. So I'm just stressing that to say that my sourcing of that is the mainstream media. So my accuracy is based upon what the mainstream media is stating. However, the range that they give is in the UK, private testing is coming in at 600, around about, it's about listed as about just short of £400, which I work out to be about somewhere about the $600, $700 mark for private testing in the UK. In the United States, privately done, it's been listed as $2,000. The US testing includes a lot of other things like X-rays and so on. So it's not the actual test; it's an overall package. So that's a little bit different from just the test itself. So I'll just stress that to kind of put that there, but it gives you an idea what the range is. Senegal, however, the price that it would cost you for testing in Senegal is listed as $1. $1. We saw the same thing happen here during the Ebola, where I think it was Chiropax, pronunciation is not great, but the point was, again, we saw massive scales and price options in terms of where developing countries couldn't afford it. Suddenly the price was brought right down. Admittedly, they were buying on bulk, but still, I mean, it just shows you the scale where in the Western world they're going, well, they can afford to pay it, so they've actually charged us more. In New Zealand's case, the Pharmac will be doing it, and it is kind of, Pharmac doesn't have the best record in the world when it comes to negotiating and buying drugs. The one that I always think of off the top of my head is the vaccine that they bought in New Zealand to combat the meningococcal disease was actually one that they paid way more than they should have, and it was actually a variant of a vaccine that the Norwegian government themselves had dumped because they had decided that it wasn't, basically it was a crap vaccine, and we'll leave it at that. So here we are again. Now, what I've turned around and done is I filed an Official Information Act this morning to the Ministry of Health saying, well, how much does it cost you? How many units have you purchased? When were they purchased? When did you receive the DNA data from China, which allows them to have the DNA sequencing to do the testing? Um, and I filed away that this morning. And now the standard response when you file an Official Information Act is, oh, thank you very much, and we'll get back to you in 20 working days. It's not even the standard reply. It's actually kind of it's law. The Official Information Act is part of the New Zealand law. Now, I've just had, for the first time in my entire life, I have never, ever seen this. I've had the Ministry of Health reply back to me with an email which wasn't signed or an individual listed or an officer. So it's no one's taking responsibility for it, which that's again a good indication that they're doing something way wonky and they know it. Saying, oh, due to the unprecedented load, we are unable to answer your Official Information Act, but go and check this crap website actually out, blah blah blah. Yeah, I I'm stunned because we've just basically had the Ministry of Health turning around and breaking the law. They're going, well, actually, we don't need to follow the law. We're the government. We're above the law now. Well, they're not, and you can be damn sure I will be filing an Ombudsman's Act against this. This is, and I'll also put this in comparison. 3 days ago, because of various heat sources that we're picking up by monitoring the atmosphere and looking at the chemical outlets, which is we're using the NIWA site to do that, we filed an Official Information Act to NIWA regarding what these hot sources were. NIWA turned around and said, look, that's we're going to actually refer you to ECAN, and ECAN came back to the stage saying, yes, we've got your report, we've acknowledged that the inquiry is an urgent one, and we will respond within 20 working days. So the law hasn't actually come to an end for the department, for NIWA or ECAN. Only the Ministry of Health now feels that it doesn't have to follow the law. Absolutely shocking. And again, get back to this issue of, this is really what we're actually asking is a very straightforward question. How much do these kits cost? To be able to know how much was being spent, when it was being spent, to gauge basically whether the decision by the government not to test was based upon prudency or was cost upon trying to save a few dollars. In the case of, if the $3,000 figure is correct, what you're looking at, and these are just very much ballpark figures, but the cluster in Auckland would have basically cost them around $5 million to go in and actually establish who had the virus and who did not, which was, very valuable information, would have saved them time, made it a lot easier to actually contain the virus, which is why we're going test. And of course, the more they can do that, the better we can all get back to work and actually start having a country and making an income and get through the huge economic hardship that this is going to cost us, which is going to cost in the billions. However, the model of the Ministry of Health was aimed at trying to save themselves dollars in the short terms without thinking about what the costs were to all the other agencies and the rest of New Zealand. And of course, when asked, they don't want to front up with that information. I think that's absolutely a really, really important question, and I do hope. I mean, I've always, as I'm not the New York Post or any of the big boys, I'm always much one of the very small doggies, and I've done a reasonably good career, basically coming up with stories or questions that have been asked and putting them on the field and having my colleagues pick up things I've actually asked and run a little bit further with them, which is, I've always quite enjoyed that niche, and I do hope today that my colleagues also kind of push onto this issue of how much do these units actually cost the government, how much are they costing the government, and if they are costing $3,000 a unit, if that information from the New Zealand Herald is originally correct, why is it costing them $3,000 a unit when we can see, when we compare to the UK figures, which is privately, that's not Ministry NHS space, it's costing $600, and in the UK it's costing, US it's costing $2,000. Why it's costing us $3,000, which it just seems like a staggering amount. We're also seeing that people have come up with other rapid response kits, which the costing units of those are $25 a cost unit. There's some really interesting articles online there, basically, where the government is saying, well, actually, these do have a role. They're not great for the first response thing, but down the road, well, okay, that's all cool. That's helping the situation. It's all getting us back to work, and it's getting us on top of it. Who fucking gives a damn? If someone's turning around using their initiative to bring in something that's actually helping the rest of us, why would you want to get in the way of it? But yet, that's exactly what the medical industry is doing. They're turning around and trying to poo-poo this $25 unit kit basis, even though the same article acknowledges that, yes, there is a role for private testing. Why they should do that, again, I'm really quite baffled by this. Surely it should be more the merrier, more hands on deck. The better is for us getting back to normal, which again goes back to this issue of who's making this money. I've got other articles which I'm working on at the moment which do relate to people that have come into New Zealand, looking at some of the companies that are clearly going to make a lot of money out of this, and it seems that the situation in New Zealand is that we are no different. Again, that's $3,000 a unit. That's from the New Zealand Herald unit. I've done a comparison against overseas situations to show that the prices are, these things aren't just $10, $15 for a bolt. They do cost. They do have a cost behind them. I found people who are confirming to me, because of the fact that they're bringing these costs in a lot cheaper. That yes, the cost that cost the government is a lot higher than it's not just a cheap thing. It's a higher cost thing. I've been tested. I've been questioned or engaged from Ministry of Health or people affiliated with the health industry and from the political parties, who sort of kind of take an attitude of like, oh, don't give us a hard time because we're doing our best, and it's a really complicated situation. What I find interesting in those engagements is they're not coming out and saying that price mentioned by the New Zealand Herald is wrong. That's what we really, that's what I'm saying. If that's not $3,000, come on, front up, tell us what it actually is. And that'll give us an idea of actually how much money you are actually spending on this, and again, why it has taken you so long to actually get these testings actually up, which is, we're at a level which is slightly comparable. Well, it's comparable to the Italian level, which, the results is self-explanatory. It's far away from the German, Austrian, and Swiss level, who, when you look at their figures, have really got on top of this by taking the World Health Organization's test attitude. We're now getting that attitude because, again, media is applying pressure, but obviously we need to apply a lot more pressure, and we also need some answers about, why did it take us so long to respond when we have known that this epidemic it was a risk factor. It's been, Robert Webster has always been my go-to guy from the Otago University, World Health Organization specialist on vaccinations. I've been quoting him since, around about the 2005-2006 period, where he was sort of putting articles in the ODT and New Zealand Herald around, and there have been repeated articles saying this is a risk that we, living in the world that we live in, where lots of transportation, that it could happen. So there should have been things set in place for when these events occurred, fast action. That actually hasn't taken place, and what increasingly now appears to be is that the reason why it's taking so long is that it is costing us a lot more than it should be costing us, and Pharmac is obviously sourcing it from people. Put it this way, there are other people out there that are finding cheaper sources, and they have the means to get it to us quicker, and that's not what Pharmac's doing. Pharmac seems to be, and that's it. There are just questions, and we'll leave it at that. There are just questions that need to be answered, and they're very, very important questions. And again, I'm absolutely staggered that the Ministry of Health thinks that they don't have to answer Official Information Act, that suddenly that the law doesn't apply. The Civil Defence Act 2002, which is basically the core bit of legislation here, it gives government agencies the ability to, it gives them powers to act in the case of emergency to stop the spread, or it gives them powers to stop the disaster or emergency from exasperating. It doesn't give them powers to suddenly turn around and take the rule book and kick it out into touch. What we're actually asking is a question which is aimed at getting answers to help actually us get that test thing going. So we're not asking questions or information which would obstruct the ability of the government agencies to respond to emergency. In fact, we're doing the very opposite. So there is no legislative power for them to turn around and say, no, we don't have to answer Official Information Acts anymore. That's just ludicrous. The Official Information Act's legislation does contain clauses within it which allows them to come back and say, well, we need an extension upon that. There are clauses built within that legislation which basically says, well, sometimes the government gets busy and things take a little bit longer. Those legislation clauses already exist within the IAA, so to turn around and say, oh, we're busy, isn't actually that's not good enough. And at the end of the day, also to highlight the situation is that the media has been classified as an essential business under the lockdown emergency. We're considered an essential business because our job is to find information and keep the public informed, which is deemed an important part of dealing with an emergency situation. So we're not considered we're considered to be part of the state, and therefore our queries do not become pushed to the back. They're actually, they're still required to be answered. And I'll leave you all on that thinking. I think I've said my point. Take care, stay safe. I'll keep hammering this point home, but I'm absolutely just amazed, and it strikes me there seems to be a whiff of price gouging going on here. Ben Vidgen, Ben Sword reporting.